recognize the member from Moose Jaw North.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is a pleasure to stop and for a few minutes and take a few minutes to recognize the budget that was presented last Wednesday. I want to commend the Minister of Finance for bringing in the budget, and also for coming out to Moose Jaw this morning and presenting it to a group of business leaders and citizens in Moose Jaw and explaining some of the issues. Mr. Speaker, it is a challenging budget. We all recognize that. We knew this was coming, and this is why we did what we did over the past year with a transformational change, saying everything is on the table. I think the citizens of Saskatchewan understood that, and this is where we're moving forward, Mr. Speaker. It's not easy, but we have a plan to control and reduce government spending. We're modernizing and expanding the tax system, ensuring the economy remains strong, investing in priority areas, and returning to a plan to return to budget in 3 years. You know, Mr. Speaker, even with the expansion of the PST this year, every Saskatchewan taxpayer at every level of income is still paying far less tax than in 2007 under the NDP. That's important to remember. Since the privilege of forming government in 2007, this province has grown in almost every sector and grown substantially. When we look at the sector of agriculture, Saskatchewan has almost half of the arable land in Saskatchewan, and we've seen crops, the yields improve and the varieties improve in pulse crops. And we see the opportunity for processing, and we notice that in Moose Jaw in the new industrial park for agricultural processing business, which is advancing along. The Agricorp head office is going to be moved from Vancouver to Moose Jaw. It's part of the Saskatchewan initiative, part of the Saskatchewan advantage of looking at head offices to move into a province that is aggressive and looking forward to building. When we look at forestry, the section of forestry, the sector of forestry, 2/3 of our province is covered with forestry. We have good opportunities in that industry. When we look at mining and resources with the coal, the oil, the gas, uranium, potash, and the new K+S mine that's coming on stream probably this year, and BPH mine as well. So Saskatchewan is expanding in that sector. We all know the advantage of and the expansion of tourism that keeps our province moving forward, the upgrades and the expansion in all of our provincial parks. Mr. Speaker, all this, it is a great province. We've known for years it's a great province. But with all its greatness and with its growth, we need to have responsibility. And Mr. Speaker, that's how I would describe this budget. A responsible reaction to the people of the province for growth and fiscal challenges that now exist with us. You know, over the past 10 years, we've seen tremendous growth. Our population is now 1,158,000 plus. Currently, we have the third lowest unemployment rate. For many years, we had the lowest unemployment rate, but we're still underneath the national average unemployment. Manufacturing, the Manufacturing Centre of Excellence is being set up in Saskatoon because our manufacturing is an important sector in this province. We realize that, and we've seen some growth. Retail sales are up. The average weekly salaries in the province are the highest in the nation. So you can see Saskatchewan is strong, the economy is strong. And in spite of the challenges, for the fiscal challenge before us, that is why this document, the 2017-2018 budget, is so vitally important and is a responsible reaction to the growth and the fiscal challenges that we are facing. Mr. Speaker, our Saskatchewan Party government came to power and inherited a $1 billion infrastructure deficit. It was a declining province. People were moving out of Saskatchewan with the worst job creation record in Canada. We saw 176 schools closed, and that was mentioned earlier. 176. That's one a month in their 16-year duration. 54 hospitals were closed, with doctors and nurses fired. All this, Mr. Speaker, is important to remember. But to go back to the NDP record, Saskatchewan was a have-not province with the worst job creation record in Canada. People were leaving the province, and the NDP government of the day was closing schools, closing hospitals and raising taxes. That's right, raising taxes. 20 times over 16 years when they were in government, taxes were raised. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, they made bad investment. They have a bad investment record, millions of dollars of bad investments, like Spudco, the fiasco over the potato industry. And not only in this province, but Navigetta, a BC phone company, and Austar, Australian communication company, Coachman Insurance, an Ontario company, if you please, TappedInto.com, a Nashville.com company, NST Chicago, a Midwestern U.S. fiber optics company. These are all investments they made not in Saskatchewan, but around the world that they lost money on, millions of dollars. Mr. Speaker, that's the NDP record. That's a record that we have to keep reminding the people of Saskatchewan because we never want to go back there. The NDP strategy for the province was decline, with people moving out of the province, businesses struggling and closing and despair. And as far as agriculture was concerned, Mr. Speaker, the NDP had all but forgotten agriculture. In fact, in Moose Jaw, the Saskatchewan Party government opened an expanded agricultural office while the NDP didn't even have a sign on the building when they were in power. Well, after the privilege of forming government in 2007, we started the humongous task of overcoming an infrastructure deficit, building roads and highways, fixing schools, constructing schools, and correcting long overdue senior support. The member from Waccamaw mentioned the seniors' income plan. That's right, it wasn't increased in 16 years of NDP government. 16 years and not a dime went into the seniors, to increasing the seniors' pension plan. Well, Mr. Speaker, our government has tripled the seniors' income plan in our past 10 years of office. Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Party government started building hospitals, building and repairing schools, building care homes and child care spaces, and we paid down debt. We lowered taxes, starting attracting investment, creating employment opportunities, and growing our population, establishing a strong economy. It was a strong economy that grows the province, Mr. Speaker, led by reasonable government for the people of the province. Over the past 10 years, Saskatchewan has vastly improved in almost every sector. However, no one could have predicted the turnaround in resource revenue. No one, not even the best forecasters in the world, could have predicted that the price of oil would have gone from over $100 a barrel to somewhere around the $30 a barrel cost. Our province relies on resource revenue to assist in the growth, provide for government programs. The drop in resource revenue led to the deficit that we ended up this year with. And Mr. Speaker, of course, this is a challenge. It presents a challenge. And it wasn't the spending on new schools or the hospitals or infrastructure those are sound investments right across the province. But it was a revenue challenge with a deep decline in resource revenue, a loss of income that no one could have planned for. Mr. Speaker, I compare it very much to a hailstorm in agriculture, something totally out of the control of the producer and totally eliminates their year's income. I remember growing up on a farm near Lipton, Saskatchewan. My dad had returned from the services in the World War II and began farming. It was a struggle, and after devoting 4 years to support our country, he and Mom started a farm. During those early years, Mom and Dad, William and Irene Mitchelson, worked hard to build a home on a farm from an abandoned log structure. They worked hard and made a business with their mixed farm of cattle and grain. Dad had to clear some of the land with axes and horses. And Mom always had a huge garden to supply the family with a year of vegetables and potatoes to feed our growing family in those early times. Mr. Speaker, I can recall one particular year a day would hail hit the farm. The hail completely wiped out the crop that year. The storm smashed all the crops completely. And as a young kid, you look at your parents for some kind of support when you feel this fear coming on. And I remember turning and seeing my mother praying with tears in her eyes as the wind blew the tree leaves across the yard. You could hear the hail hitting the house and the upstairs windows breaking. Mr. Speaker, we lost the entire crop that year. You know, it's a scar in my memory that I can still remember very vividly years later. Fortunately, today there is, in agriculture, there is crop insurance, but Dad had no crop insurance that year. It was early August, and in anticipation of a good crop, Dad had purchased a brand new New Holland baler and a side delivery rake that hadn't been delivered yet. Equipment that he knew he needed, but now without a crop could ill afford to buy. He talked about it years later, knowing that he could ill afford it, but realized in the long term needed to make these investments to maintain the strength of his farming operation and continue to grow his farm. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's much like the situation we're finding ourselves in today. An income loss that no one could have predicted, resource revenue from an industry that slowed right down, and much like that hailstorm, revenue that we relied upon to support and operate the family farm was eliminated. Mr. Speaker, that day, our family income was reduced by a lot more than 3.5%. You know, I've talked to some business people and some constituents in Moose Jaw over the weekend. Several of them are finding that there is a strain on the income, that their income is lower, and one constituent in particular was saying his income will be about 20% loss because of the economic turndown over the past 2 years. Yet they realize that it's not the fault of the government. They've had to change some of their lifestyle. They caution their spending and address this to the new reality. As a responsible government, as a transparent government, we realize the task before us and accept the challenge. Through the budget process, we have developed a plan to move forward, supporting the strong economy, providing the service that are expected from government, like health care and education, social programs and infrastructure. This will be done by moving away from the dependence on resource revenue. It'll be done to move toward a stable source, a consumption tax-based system that continues with programs and support provided by government, ensuring that our economy stays strong. We know resource revenue is volatile. We realize that we need to get away from traditional revenue resources and diversify the tax base in order to provide the services that government is expected to provide. To do that, some hard choices are made. But, Mr. Speaker, that's leadership. That's looking forward to move forward. This is a plan moving forward with a strong economy, investing in priority areas and planning to return to a balanced budget in 3 years. I commend many organizations that have taken steps to find efficiencies. There are several of them, and one in particular I wanted to highlight because they had talked to me about some of the efficiency they have found. Prairie South School Division is one of these organizations that made adjustments through innovation and leadership with programs, efficiencies, and staff efficiencies, program efficiencies, infrastructural renewal, and they're saving millions of dollars doing it. You know, our government has come a long way in 10 years with the wise use of resource revenue from all sources. The Saskatchewan-Barty government has built a strong economy, which in turn builds a strong province. The new hospital in Moose Jaw is a prime example. The new children's hospital in Saskatoon, and the provincial hospital replacement in North Battleford. 750 more doctors and 3,000 more nurses. Mr. Speaker, there are 40 new schools, 18 care homes, and we've lowered property taxes and lowered income taxes while maintaining revenue sharing with municipalities and now adding 889 child care spaces. We've done this, Mr. Speaker, with good investments, good planning, and established a AAA credit rating. So even with the expansion of the PST this year, every Saskatchewan taxpayer at every level of income is still paying far less in taxes than in 2007 under the NDP. We are meeting the challenge by controlling and reducing spending, by modernizing and expanding the tax base, ensuring the economy remains strong, investing in priority areas, and planning to return to a balanced budget in 3 years. Saskatchewan has faced an economic slowdown over the past 2 years. However, economic indicators show that Saskatchewan's economy is poised to rebound. Just some of those indicators are 1,900 jobs were added in the first 2 months of this year. International exports are up by 15.6% in January, 11% increase in manufacturing, 5.1% in wholesale trade, and over 6% increase in new car sales. Retail sales were up by 6.3% in January. This is very positive, Mr. Speaker, and very encouraging. Yet we see the opposition members negatively chirping in the province about the status of our province, boondoggles, fiascos, scandals, job killing, waste. That's all the kind of the language they use. But Mr. Speaker, they're not thinking positively. They're not looking at the facts or listening to the facts. Mr. Speaker, our government has done very well in the past 10 years. Even their petitions are on spending, 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 more money with no plan of where that money may come from. But Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan economy is strong. Growth is predicted at 0.8%, forecast for 2017. Unemployment rate is expected to remain about 6.2% during 2017, with a plan to get back to a balanced budget in 3 years. We relied on revenue that isn't there anymore, Mr. Speaker, and no one can blame us for taking the path that we took, but the path has changed and the revenue isn't there anymore. But a new path will be created, a path that is diversified with less reliance on resource revenue. We understand change isn't easy, but it is necessary. Yes, there are some difficulties in facing this deficit, but our plan we can do it. We will control and reduce government spending. We are modernizing and expanding tax systems. We're ensuring the economy remains strong, and we're investing in priority areas, and yes, the plan to come back to a balanced budget in 3 years. You know, I respect the input from our constituents in Moose Jaw North and those from across the province. And I commend the Minister of Finance and his ministry for the hours and the days and the weeks spent in resourcing, studying, consulting, deliberating, developing, and presenting the 2017-18 budget that was received just last Wednesday. The budget helps address the fiscal challenge caused by the decline in resource revenue that made up 19% of the provincial revenue and now only comes up at 9%. Yet we are meeting the challenge. This budget is meeting the challenge, Mr. Speaker. I reject the amendment made from the opposition, and I support the government budget in its entirety as presented. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.